Wholesalers, before we begin the business of this particular podcast, I want to let you know about something that we think is pretty important. Wholesaler Masterminds schedulers made an important change at the beginning of 2017. And the change we made is that all of the folks that do scheduling for Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers are now employees. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means for the scheduler, they now have benefits and they are happier schedulers. What that means is that they can be more productive, and most importantly, what that means for you, you get a better quality of scheduler. If you want to learn more about Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers, go to WMMschedulers.com or hit the website at Wholesaler Masterminds. You'll find various ads there. Let me tell you how we got to today, all right? I was having a conversation with two different coaching clients. And we were talking about, in one case, their peerless value proposition, in another case, talking about their advisor reconnaissance. And I was asking them why they hadn't moved forward with some of the action steps, or if they had moved forward, why did they stall out? And in both cases, both wholesalers started to give me some answers which spoke to the issue of confidence. They weren't certain that what they should do felt right to do, even though intellectually they knew they should do it. And that's why I went out and found today's guest. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. So wholesalers, as I alluded to in the open, I went out to Facebook. I was at Facebook, and in my feed, there was a Success Magazine video that came up. The Success Magazine video was an interview. The interview was with Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins is our guest today. She is the author of the internationally best-selling book, The 5-Second Rule. She is the most booked woman's motivational speaker in the world. She is a CNN commentator. She is the mother of 3, and we'll talk a little bit about her other experience in just a moment. But most importantly, Mel Robbins, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's great to be here with you.
I'm delighted. I'm giddy you're here. I told you, I watched the Lewis Howes interview, and wholesalers, if you haven't tuned into Lewis Howes on YouTube, great interviews. He does an awesome job. And Mel really did a wonderful hour with him. So we're going to distill that down. I'd like to be crisp with our discussion today, but I'm really fascinated by how you got to here. So, here is, circa 4 years ago, you do a TEDx Talk and now has 10 million views. But if we go back deeper and further, you started as an attorney.
Yeah. I grew up in the Midwest and went to Dartmouth and Boston College Law School and started out my career as a public defender in Manhattan, Rob.
In Manhattan, of all places.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of crime there. At least there was when Giuliani was first mayor, and he was criminalizing everything as a way to clean up the streets.
It was job security.
Yep. The public defenders were very busy, and so that's how I started my career. Gosh, I mean, I when I start to think about the math, I'm not sure if it's lack of math skills or it's just sheer horror that so much time has gone by, but that was some 20 years ago.
Now, you have worked as an executive coach, and you've also, and congratulations, some years past on the Gracie Award. Wholesalers, the Gracie Award is for the Emmys, the Oscars of talk show business. Congratulations on that. I want to talk about kind of this moment of transition that you made to what you do now, because I was fascinated by the whole confluence of events that took you from being a very successful back then with a Fox show, and then moving on to find some difficulties with what was going on with your husband's business. I mean, there was all this confluence of stuff that brought you to the aha moment watching television with a Manhattan. I need our listeners to hear that story, because it really gets us to the foundation of why this works, and then we'll talk about the why, what this is.
Yeah. So, you said that you were coaching two clients and that both of their issues is around confidence. And confidence is a wonderful thing when you have it. And so is motivation. And so is courage. But one of the things that's interesting about life and business is that typically when you need it most, you're totally tapped out of confidence. And when you need to make the change, the courage disappears. And when you got to do something that's hard or annoying or difficult or whatever, you lose all motivation. And so one of the things that we're going to be talking about is some science-backed tools that will give you instant confidence, instant motivation, and instant courage, and not in a reckless way, but that type of action that's actually hardwired to your inner wisdom. So what happened for me is I had a very successful career and had been a lawyer, had gotten involved in the high-tech scene in Boston and had launched an executive coaching business. And then the media business called. This would have been 2008 or 2007. And they had read about my coaching business in Inc. magazine, and then it was CNBC that called, and they were interested in doing a show. And so I had a series of meetings, and that led to a couple development deals, which, they're not the same kind of deals that you see in the wholesaling business, where, in the media business, if you offer somebody that's new to the business a deal, it's for no money. But most people that are dying based on their ego to get into the media. So for about a year, I did a bunch of stuff with ABC and with Sirius, where I was kind of in the development phase, which means they're not paying you. And then I landed a show with Fox. And so by this point, 2 years of dabbling in the media business has gone by. And, of course, as I'm pursuing that, my coaching practice is winding down. And at the same time, my husband left a corporate job to follow his dream of opening, wait for it, a pizza restaurant. So I found myself at the age of 41 in a situation that I never actually planned for. A lot of stuff just kind of happened. I never thought I'd be in the media business. I never thought that Chris would leave technology and go into the restaurant business. And what happened is Chris and I had this weird confluence where the first restaurant he opened, a small 40-seat joint outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in Belmont, was an instant success. And so, of course, what you do when one thing is working is you magnify it and go 10x and try to open a bunch of them at the same time, and you leverage the shit out of yourself. And, being an entrepreneur, you want to have as much equity as you possibly can, and, you want to make sure that the founder shares are right. And so we, based on the first one working and thinking that I was about to become a media star, we put our entire life savings into the expansion. And this was 2008. And we all know what happened in 2008. The bottom fell out of everything. And the second restaurant failed, and it failed so profoundly that it really then cannibalized the working capital to get the third and the fourth open, which then put us in a extraordinary situation in terms of the debt load that the business was carrying. And since we had secured all of it and put all of our money into it, that meant that the liens started hitting the house, and the collection calls started ringing, or the phone started ringing. It was always the collection calls. And it was at about this point that 2 years into dabbling in the media business and winding down my coaching practice, I had been an executive coach for A.G. Edwards for all their top managing producers, and I decided not to renew the contract because I was about to do a big show with Fox. And not Fox Business, Fox News, but an actual reality show on primetime television for Fox. So
the show, by the way, was called "Someone's Gotta Go," which
yes, and it turns out the person that needed to go was me, because we shot 2 episodes, and then the legal department tabled it, which meant they put it in the on deck position. They felt the show was so disgusting, even for Fox, that in the environment where everyone was losing their jobs in their houses, a show where Mel Robbins was firing people on national television for real jobs was not really the right tone. So what happened for me is it meant that I was locked into a contract and not getting paid, and I was on a blacklist, meaning I was exclusive to Fox because they had an 18-month window to figure out what to do with the show.
All of which is fantastic reasoning for the Manhattans you're about to get to.
Yes. So then so what happens? So what do you do when the bottom drops out and you suddenly lose everything, and you also have this ego and this attitude like, hey, wait a minute, I got an Ivy League education. I got a lot. This should not be happening. And because Chris was so committed to saving the business, which he and his business partner ultimately did, it wasn't a situation that we could talk about. Because you've got people in the community that have invested, and you've got a business that's open, and you've got to keep the public face up. And so out on the outside, I just pretended like everything was status quo. On the inside, I was an alcoholic. Chris and I were fighting like crazy. We had zero money. I mean, my dad paid our mortgage for a couple months, and then that stopped. And, going to the grocery store was a terrifying experience because I was afraid I'd bump into somebody who would say, how's the show going? Or, hey, how's the restaurants? And I was also scared that I wouldn't have any money in the checking account. I was too scared to look. So I was, totally overwhelmed with the idea that I was about to try to buy some groceries and the check card wouldn't go through. So it was a terrifying time. And when you have a situation happen, and something's going to happen to you. I mean, you're going to lose a job, or you're going to end a relationship, or you're going to lose somebody that you love, or maybe you're going to get a health diagnosis, or maybe you're going to make a bad investment, or maybe the economy tanks. Something's going to happen. And when it does, that's the moment that you need confidence. And yet you're not going to have it because you're not going to feel like you have what it takes to change it. You're not going to feel ready to face what life is handing you. So you're going to get wrapped up in like all of the self-doubt and the thinking patterns that we have that can undermine us.
So what was the aha moment? So there was a very specific moment that you spoke about where you had that epiphany where you said, that's that thing that I'm going to use for myself and that others are going to want to hear about.
Yeah, totally. So I didn't know about the others yet. This was classified information, Rob, for about 4 years. First of all, what I'm about to tell you is profoundly stupid. And it is, on its face, so silly that you could make a lethal mistake and not consider the profound nature of what I'm about to tell you. Because on the face, it sounds so simple and so dumb. So my turning moment, the catalyst that changed everything in my life, is I was struggling. I mean, I was unemployed. We were facing bankruptcy. We were talking divorce. I wanted to change, by the way, just like your two clients wanted to implement the changes that you talked about. They intended on it, but they didn't. And I was stuck in that same trap of knowing what to do but not doing it. It's called the knowledge-action gap. There's a gap between knowing and doing, and that's where you get stuck. And so for me, it all started with the snooze alarm. Every morning I would hit it 3, 4, 5 times a morning, and I knew I shouldn't. I knew I should get up. I knew I should look for a job. I knew I shouldn't drink so much. I knew I shouldn't snap a crisp, but I was doing none of those things. So one night I was turning off the TV, and there was a commercial, and there was a rocket ship launching at the end of it, and I had this epiphany, and again, I'd probably had about 4 Manhattans that night, so it might have been the booze talking, but I don't care what it was. I'm glad I listened to it. I had this epiphany where I said, that's it, oh my God, the rocket ship, that's the answer. I'm going to launch myself out of bed so fast tomorrow morning that I can't talk myself out of it. So the next morning, the snooze alarm goes off, and I had a habit. Which is nothing more than a behavior pattern that you repeat without thinking about it. I had a habit of hitting the snooze button. But that next morning, the alarm goes off, and by the way, Rob, nothing had changed. I mean, I was still unemployed. I still had all these problems. I was still out of confidence, but I did something I'd never done before. I started counting backwards like NASA does. I went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I stood up. And it was the darndest thing. I'll never forget. I was standing in the bedroom, and it was, Boston. It was February. It was dark. It was cold. And I thought, what the hell just happened? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. No, I counted out loud that first one. And then I went about my day, and the next morning, the alarm goes off. I didn't feel like getting up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I got up. The next morning, didn't feel like getting up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I got up. And I think it was that third morning that it hit me. And this is the piece about life that is so true. That first of all, your inner wisdom is always talking to you. It's that knowledge that is hardwired in your DNA that's urging you forward, that's pushing you to change, to grow, to do the things that will bring you more joy, that might be outside your comfort zone, but certainly will create opportunities for growth for you.
And you juxtapose that with the spotlight effect, right?
Yeah, and the problem is that you only got a 5-second window. The moment that your inner wisdom speaks to you, you should say that yet, or you should make that phone call, or you should do that thing that Rob was telling you to do. If you don't move within 5 seconds, your mind is designed to stop you. There's a cognitive bias that they've discovered that all of our brains have. It's called the spotlight effect. Your mind is hardwired to magnify anything that it appears to be risky or uncertain. So anything outside your comfort zone, anything that requires change, anything that's difficult, in your mind's eye, seems risky. So the second that your mind gets a clue that, Rob's about to make a phone call that could be uncomfortable. Rob's about to do some cold prospecting today. That's not going to be fun. Rob's about to get his ass off the couch and go for a run. That's going to be uncomfortable. Your mind, the second it catches wind that you're about to do that thing, you know what it does? It actually starts magnifying that phone call, magnifying the pain of that run, magnifying the difficulty of the conversation in order to stop you from doing it. You feel like you don't want to do it. Yes. And so within 5 seconds flat, you'll find yourself talking yourself out of running. Oh, no, I feel tired. You'll find yourself talking yourself out of, I guarantee you, your clients, they told you, yes, I knew it. Yes, I intended on it. I didn't feel like it.
Mel, I want to ask you a question. How did you move from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I got out of bed, to 3 years of research that goes into a book? In other words, you spoke about the inner wisdom piece, and perhaps that was your guide, but how did you again metamorphosize from, well, that worked, to this is something huge
to a bestseller that we had to reprint 6 times, 3 weeks, to become the number one woman in the world, to running an 8-figure consulting firm, okay, let me tell you. So I noticed after that third morning that, holy shit, there's this 5-second window all day long. And all day long, if I simply go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and lean into all of the things that I know I should be doing, suddenly everything turns around and I gain confidence and control and courage. And, if I feel myself getting upset with Chris, but my values are to be supportive, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shift my tone. If my goal is to be healthy, but I don't feel like running and I feel myself hesitating, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, push myself to move. If my goal is to grow my business, and I know I have calls I need to make for prospecting, instead of thinking about it, which won't make the phone dial 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and pick it up. And so for 3 years, I used this. And over the course of 3 years, everything changed. And by everything, I mean everything. Launched and sold a couple companies, got back into the media business, and landed a syndicated radio show that got me a deal with CNN. I started using the rule to manage my emotions in business and became one hell of a negotiator, because you don't do a good job of deal making when your emotions are involved. So you use 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to shove them back down when you start to feel them rising up. And again, this is classified information, Rob. I was never going to tell anybody because, number one, I don't want you to have it because back then at least, because I don't want you to have an advantage like I have. And it sounds so stupid. I mean, when you go to Dartmouth and you have a law degree, how do you explain to people? Oh, you just have to count backwards, in the rifle page. I mean, it sounds so dumb. And so I gave this TED Talk, and again, the talk is really more about how I changed my career so many times. It wasn't about the 5-second rule. And at the very end of the talk, I must have been in flow because I didn't plan on talking about it. I say, oh, by the way, there's this thing that I do. And I walk off the stage. I think that's the last time I'm ever speaking again because it was the first speech I had ever given in my life. And somebody put that talk online. As you said, it's now got over 10 million views. People from around the world started to write. We've heard from more than 100,000 people in 90 countries.
Wow.
And they all wrote about that silly 5-second rule. And they were writing about some profound stuff. I mean, people that were quitting smoking after 26 years and sticking to it. People that were fixing their marriages. People that were ending a battle with drugs, with gambling. People that were tripling the size of their businesses in less than a year. And we know of 12 people that have stopped themselves from committing suicide. Literally, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put down the pills, walk away from the rope, put the gun down. So when people write to you from around the world, and they tell you these stories about using something that you invented, I felt a moral obligation to figure out why the hell this thing worked. And it was at about that time that people started to, because of the success of the TED Talk, people started reaching out, asking me to speak. Now, at this point in my career, I'm an honor commentator for CNN. I've launched and sold a content aggregator in the tech media space. I'm in the middle of launching a second company. I wasn't speaking full time. I just started, sharing the 5-second rule. And so I did the research project because we had people from around the world. I mean, hell, I hired a full-time assistant to simply handle the email. And I was curious. Why does something so dumb, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, how is that possibly the secret to changing anything?
Let's pivot to that let's pivot to that right now. Let's pivot to that whole notion of the 2 modes of the brain and why this works and what it does in your prefrontal cortex that you speak about. Let's give the listeners just
It's fascinating. It's really fascinating stuff, and I knew none of this. I mean, when I think about how much money I plowed into education and some of the most fundamental things that I didn't understand about how we make decisions and how the mind works. So basically, the short answer is this. The 5-second rule, when you count backwards, it does not work if you count up, because counting up, if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can keep going. And it's also, counting up is something you do in your day-to-day life, so you don't have to focus when you do it. Counting backwards requires focus. It's also an action. Anything that requires focus activates the prefrontal cortex in functional MRIs. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is active when you're changing your behavior, when you're learning a new behavior, and when you're doing strategic thinking. So in the language of change and of habits, the prefrontal cortex is the gold mine when it comes to positive new behavior change. And so the 5-second rule is a form of what we call metacognition, which is a fancy term that means you can use tricks to outsmart your own brain in furtherance of your higher goal. And so when you count backwards, in the language of habit research, if any of you have read The Power of Habits, Charles's fantastic book about habits, he's a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer from the New York Times, he writes about what scientists call starting rituals. Starting rituals are behaviors that actually trigger new behavior. And so the 5-second rule is a starting ritual that triggers positive new behavior. How does it work neurologically? Well, what it does is when you're engaged in behavior that is a bad habit, so let's name a few that we all have: self-doubt, procrastination, overthinking, laziness, blowing things off. Like, those are all patterns of behavior, micromanaging, snapping at people, that get encoded in the interior part of your brain. They're habits. They're patterns that you repeat without even thinking. Let me give you an example of a habit. When you pull your pants on in the morning, you either put your left leg or your right leg in first. And now that I've said it, you're thinking about which leg it is. But this morning, when you pulled your pants on, Rob, you didn't think, okay, pick up my left foot and stick it in the foot. No, it's automated behavior that gets encoded into the basal ganglia, into the interior part of your brain. In order to teach yourself to pull on your pants with your right leg, you've got to interrupt that habit and then direct your actions with your prefrontal cortex. So what the 5-second rule is doing is, if you have a habit of doubting yourself, if you have a habit of overthinking, if you have a habit of procrastinating, if you have a habit of self-sabotaging talk when you're sitting in a sales meeting, like to yourself, when you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you cut off that habit and you switch the gears and you activate the prefrontal cortex. So what it's doing is it's interrupting the part of the brain that normally sabotages your success, and it's awakening the part of the brain that makes positive change easy. That's what it does. That's why it works.
I want to talk about the difference between confidence and courage. You provided, and wholesalers will have this on the website, you provided a great piece of content around confidence, but it's framed around courage. And I want to ask you to tell the listeners, how are you segmenting or separating or further defining confidence versus courage, and how one seems to get masked as the other when we think about it?
Oh, sure. So I can even take it a step further. So there are 3 C's that are really important to satisfaction and to success, to fulfillment. And it's clarity, courage, and confidence. And they actually all work in a loop to help build one another. So, we all have this inner wisdom that is guiding you forward. Generally, as you're listening to this, I will say that you know what you need to do. You know the steps that you need to take in order to grow your business. You know the things that you could do that would make you happier and healthier. You know what habits you could create in your life that would bring you more joy. Knowing won't make you do it. But, when it comes to, actually changing your life, knowing that the first step is the clarity to hear that wisdom, right? So that in any situation, when you are, in a business meeting or you're standing in your kitchen and that inner wisdom rises up and it says, dude, you said you'd go for a run, put the donut down and get going. That is, hearing that, the ability to tune in and hear that signal, that is clarity. Not something outside of you. It's the ability to tune into what your wisdom is saying to you. The next piece of it is courage. Courage is not this big concept. Courage is a small concept. Courage is something you need every single day, because courage is the ability to do things that feel difficult, uncertain, scary, or new. That's what courage is. Courage is an action. Courage is the ability to take action when you feel uncertain. So you said that your clients knew what they needed to do based on the coaching sessions, but they felt uncertain. That's why they didn't do it, even though they had clarity that that was the right action to take. So they had clarity because they knew what they should be doing. What was missing was courage, the ability to act in the face of uncertainty. Now, what is confidence? Confidence is what you get when you see yourself acting with courage. Confidence is the skill that comes when you see yourself being the kind of person that takes actions on the things that your wisdom is telling you to do. Over time, every time you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and take action on your wisdom, even though you feel uncertain, what happens is you're building the habit of confidence. Confidence is wonderful when you feel it up front, but you can build it as a skill by listening to your inner wisdom and then pushing yourself 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to act with courage. when you see yourself doing it over and over and over, you start to feel confident because you've proven it to yourself through acts of courage. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Wholesalers, there's a reason why Mel Robbins' 5-second rule book is blowing up. There's a reason why she is the most booked female speaker on the planet. There's a reason why she's bringing us this message today. If you are thinking that, geez, this would make wonderful content for some upcoming meeting, event, complex, national sales meeting, whatever the case may be, WMM Speakers, WMMspeakers.com. We'll get you more information about Wholesaler Mastermind speakers, and we'll hook you up with Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins, thank you so very much. I know you have insanity going on in your life, taking advantage taking advantage of the opportunity, which as you should, and spreading this amazing word. So thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. And listen, this is a waste of breath unless you guys actually use the rule. So it's free. It works immediately. It works every time you use it, but you got to use it. And the reason why it works is because it cuts through all the bullshit that you do that stops you from having everything you've ever wanted, and it brings the power in you to the surface in less than 5 seconds.
Wholesalers, I could not begin to add upon that. Come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.